What if I told you that Benjamin Franklin left behind a warning so disturbing that it reveals why 99% of men will vanish from history without a trace? Franklin didn't just discover electricity, he discovered something far more shocking about human nature. He realized that most men are already dead, they just don't know it yet. You see, Franklin understood what modern psychology would later prove through the Dunning-Kruger effect and social conformity studies. The masses live in a kind of walking death. But here's what terrifies the comfortable. Franklin didn't just observe this phenomenon, he weaponized it. Picture Philadelphia, 1730. Young Franklin walks among the merchants and laborers. But what he sees isn't a bustling city of opportunity. He sees a graveyard of the living. In his private letters to his sister Jane, Franklin wrote something chilling. I observe that men who spend their days in comfortable routine have already chosen their tombstones. They mistake breathing for living and comfort for achievement. This wasn't philosophical musing. This was tactical observation. Franklin realized that while other men sleepwalked through existence, he could shape the very reality they lived in. While they worried about daily bread, he would control the bakery. But how did a candlemaker's son rise to become one of history's most influential figures, while thousands of respectable men around him faded into obscurity? The answer lies in what Franklin called the great deception of ordinary life. Most men, he observed, mistake motion for progress. They confuse being busy with being productive. They think survival equals success. Franklin saw through this illusion immediately. While other young men his age were learning trades to secure steady employment, Franklin was learning to manipulate the very systems that employed them. At 17, when his peers were seeking job security, Franklin was already planning media domination. Think about that. While teenagers today debate college majors, Franklin was strategizing how to control public opinion across entire colonies. He understood something that most people never grasp, the difference between playing the game and owning the game board. Franklin's insight predates modern psychology by 200 years. But recent studies prove his observations were devastatingly accurate. Dr. David McClelland's research at Harvard revealed that only 3% of people possess what he called achievement orientation, the drive to accomplish something meaningful rather than simply exist comfortably. Study results. 97% of subjects preferred security over significance. But here's where it gets darker. The Stanford marshmallow experiment showed that most people cannot delay gratification for even 15 minutes to achieve a better outcome. Franklin understood this weakness centuries before science proved it. While other men chose immediate comfort over long-term impact, Franklin chose temporary discomfort for permanent influence. He wrote in Poor Richard's Almanac, "The sleeping fox catches no poultry." This wasn't advice. This was a warning about the fate of the unconscious masses. But Franklin's genius wasn't just recognizing human weakness, it was systematically exploiting it for strategic advantage. Consider this. While his contemporaries spent evenings in taverns complaining about their circumstances, Franklin spent those same hours learning French, studying philosophy, and building the intellectual arsenal that would make him indispensable to future leaders. While they drank away their frustrations, he was weaponizing knowledge. While they gossiped about local politics, he was positioning himself to influence international affairs. The psychological principle Franklin understood is now called temporal discounting, the tendency for people to value immediate rewards over future benefits. Franklin realized that this cognitive bias created a massive opportunity gap. While the masses chose immediate pleasure, he could monopolize long-term power. Everyone knows about Franklin's 13 virtues. Most people think it was about self-improvement. They're wrong. Franklin's virtue system wasn't about becoming a better person. It was about becoming a more effective manipulator of human nature. The way to see by faith is to shut the eye of reason. Benjamin Franklin. Notice what he's really saying. Faith, meaning blind trust in authority, requires the death of critical thinking. Franklin didn't practice these virtues to become virtuous. He practiced them to become trusted. Each virtue was a strategic tool designed to create a specific psychological effect on others. Temperance wasn't about health. It was about maintaining clarity while others dulled their minds with excess. When everyone else was impaired by alcohol or gluttony, Franklin remained sharp, alert, and capable of recognizing opportunities they missed. Silence wasn't about humility. It was about listening for opportunities while others revealed their weaknesses through chatter. Every conversation became intelligence gathering. Every social interaction became strategic reconnaissance. Industry wasn't about work ethic, it was about outproducing competitors while they remained comfortable. While others worked to meet expectations, Franklin worked to exceed every possible standard, making himself irreplaceable. Order wasn't about personal organization. It was about creating systematic approaches to influence that could be replicated and scaled. Resolution wasn't about keeping promises to himself. It was about building a reputation for reliability that would make others dependent on his word. Frugality wasn't about saving money. It was about resource allocation, spending less on immediate gratification so he could invest more in long-term positioning. Moderation wasn't about balance. It was about avoiding extremes that might alienate potential allies or provide ammunition for enemies. Cleanliness wasn't about hygiene. It was about projecting competence and attention to detail that would inspire confidence in his abilities. Tranquility wasn't about inner peace. It was about maintaining emotional control while others made decisions based on passion and impulse. Chastity wasn't about moral purity. It was about avoiding scandals that could be used to destroy his reputation and influence. Humility wasn't about modest behavior. It was about strategic positioning, appearing non-threatening while accumulating devastating amounts of power. While Philadelphia's merchants gossiped in taverns, Franklin built a media empire that would shape American thought for generations. But here's the truly unsettling part. Franklin documented this entire strategy in plain sight, and still, 300 years later, people read his autobiography as a guide to personal development rather than a manual for psychological warfare. Here's where Franklin's genius becomes truly unsettling. He didn't just avoid obscurity, he systematically created it for others. The Junto, Franklin's discussion club, wasn't a social gathering. It was a recruitment center for future allies and a neutralization chamber for potential rivals. Franklin's strategy: identify the ambitious, co-opt or isolate. Members who showed independent thinking were given important but powerless positions. Those who demonstrated loyalty were given real influence. Sound familiar? Modern corporate structures use the exact same model. Keep the masses busy with the illusion of importance while real decisions happen in smaller circles. Franklin perfected what we now call controlled opposition. He would identify potential rivals and then create organizations, committees, or projects that made them feel important while keeping them focused on meaningless tasks. Meanwhile, Franklin maintained control over what actually mattered: information flow, resource allocation, and strategic relationships. The Junto became a laboratory for testing these manipulation techniques. Franklin would present ideas and watch how different personality types responded. He studied which arguments convinced which kinds of people. He mapped the psychological triggers that could be used to motivate or neutralize different individuals. This wasn't academic interest. This was military-grade intelligence gathering focused on civilian targets. Franklin wrote to his friend Cadwallader Colden, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. But a man who thinks he convinced himself will defend that opinion to the death." This wasn't philosophy. This was psychological warfare. Franklin understood that direct persuasion creates resistance, but indirect influence creates fanatics. He developed techniques for making people believe that his ideas were actually their own discoveries. He would plant seeds of concepts, then guide conversations so that others would independently arrive at conclusions that served Franklin's interests. The most chilling part: the people being manipulated felt grateful for the experience. They thought Franklin was helping them think through problems, when he was actually programming their thought processes. Look around you today. How many people do you know who are truly building something that will outlast them? Most are trapped in the same pattern Franklin identified 300 years ago. They mistake activity for achievement, comfort for success, and routine for purpose. Social media, 4.8 billion users. Historical impact, nearly zero. We have more tools for influence than Franklin could have imagined, yet most people use them to document their breakfast instead of building their legacy. But here's what's even more disturbing: the same psychological vulnerabilities Franklin exploited in the 1700s are being exploited today on a massive scale. Social media platforms use the same principle of temporal discounting, offering immediate dopamine hits in exchange for long-term attention and data harvesting. Dating apps exploit the same human need for validation that Franklin used to build his network of useful relationships. News media uses the same fear-based psychological triggers that Franklin employed in his political pamphlets. Corporate hierarchies still use Franklin's model of giving people prestigious titles while keeping real power concentrated in small circles. The difference is that today's manipulators lack Franklin's long-term vision. They're optimizing for quarterly profits instead of generational influence. Franklin would have been horrified or delighted. More sheep means less competition for the wolves. Today's influencers think they're building empires. Franklin built a nation. The difference? Franklin understood that true power comes not from gathering followers, but from shaping the systems those followers live within. Contemporary influencers focus on personal branding. Franklin focused on institutional control. Modern entrepreneurs build companies. Franklin built the legal, financial, and educational frameworks that all future companies would operate within. Today's politicians seek office. Franklin created the offices that future politicians would seek. This is the difference between playing for applause and playing for permanence. Most people today are optimizing for metrics that Franklin would have considered distractions: likes, shares, follow counts, engagement rates. Franklin optimized for metrics that actually matter: institutional influence, resource control, strategic relationships, and systemic impact. He understood that individual recognition is temporary, but systemic influence is permanent. When you control the systems, you don't need to be famous. You're essential. But here's what the self-help gurus won't tell you about Franklin's path. It was lonely, brutally lonely. While other men built comfortable social circles, Franklin built uncomfortable alliances. While they sought approval, he sought influence. While they chose easy friendships, he chose strategic relationships. To be thrown upon one's own resources is to be cast into the very lap of fortune. Benjamin Franklin. Franklin understood that significance requires sacrifice, not just of comfort, but of the warm delusions that make mediocrity bearable. The psychological cost of Franklin's strategy was enormous. He lived in a world where every relationship was potentially transactional. Every conversation was a strategic calculation. Every social interaction required evaluation of long-term consequences. He sacrificed the illusion of security for actual security. He sacrificed temporary approval for permanent influence. He sacrificed being liked for being remembered. Think about what this means psychologically. Franklin couldn't afford the luxury of genuine friendships because genuine friends might conflict with strategic objectives. He couldn't indulge in spontaneous emotional expressions because every public statement had potential political ramifications. He couldn't allow himself the comfort of believing in simple moral categories because effective manipulation requires understanding the full spectrum of human motivation. This is the hidden cost of greatness that no one talks about: the complete elimination of psychological comfort zones. While other men could relax into familiar patterns and predictable relationships, Franklin had to maintain constant vigilance and strategic awareness. When Franklin died, 20,000 people attended his funeral, not because he was popular, but because he was essential. But here's the question that should terrify you. How many of those 20,000 people actually knew him? How many were mourning the man versus mourning the loss of the systems he created? Franklin achieved something far more disturbing than fame. He achieved indispensability. Most people want to be loved. Franklin chose to be needed. Most people want to be understood. Franklin chose to be underestimated. Most people want to be comfortable. Franklin chose to be effective. How many people would notice if you disappeared tomorrow? More importantly, would they notice because they loved you or because they needed you? Franklin's most chilling insight wasn't about success. It was about time. Lost time is never found again. Every day you spend in comfortable routine is a day stolen from your potential legacy. Every hour you waste seeking approval is an hour your competitors use to build empires. But Franklin's understanding of time was more sophisticated than simple time management advice. He realized that most people operate on entirely the wrong temporal scale. They think in terms of days, weeks, maybe years. Franklin thought in terms of decades and centuries. While his contemporaries made decisions based on immediate consequences, Franklin made decisions based on generational impact. This temporal advantage allowed him to make investments in influence that wouldn't pay off for decades, while his competitors focused on quarterly results. Think about this strategically. If you're the only person in your environment thinking on a 20-year timeline while everyone else is thinking on a 2-year timeline, you have an almost insurmountable advantage. You can make moves that seem irrational in the short term but become obviously brilliant in the long term. You can sacrifice short-term gains for long-term positioning while your competitors exhaust themselves competing for immediate rewards. You can build relationships and accumulate resources slowly and systematically while others burn through their networks for quick wins. Franklin didn't just succeed despite the mediocrity around him. He succeeded because of it. While others competed for scraps of recognition, he created new forms of recognition. While they fought for existing positions, he invented new positions to hold. The terrifying truth Franklin discovered is that most people will choose comfortable obscurity over uncomfortable significance every single time. This creates what economists call market inefficiency, opportunities that exist because most participants aren't rational actors. Franklin treated human psychology like any other natural resource to be studied, understood, and exploited. He realized that predictable irrationality creates predictable opportunities. If you know that 97% of people will choose security over significance, you can position yourself to capture the value they're abandoning. If you understand that most people cannot delay gratification, you can build strategies that take advantage of their temporal discounting. If you recognize that the masses prefer comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths, you can control information flow by telling them what they want to hear while positioning yourself based on reality. This is why Franklin succeeded while thousands of equally intelligent, equally capable men around him failed. It wasn't superior talent, it was superior strategy. It wasn't better luck, it was better understanding of human nature. It wasn't harder work, it was more effective work directed toward more valuable objectives. Will you? Franklin left us more than inventions and ideas. He left us a mirror. Look into it. What do you see? A future founding father of something meaningful? Or another comfortable ghost who chose safety over significance? But here's the final test of whether you understand Franklin's lesson. Are you reading this as entertainment or as intelligence? Are you consuming this content to feel informed or to become dangerous? Are you looking for motivation to feel better about your current path or for strategy to completely change your trajectory? Franklin would have judged you not by your intentions, but by your actions in the next 48 hours. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because while you're deciding whether to act, someone else is already acting. While you're weighing the risks of significance, someone else is accepting those risks and seizing the opportunities you're abandoning. While you're choosing comfort, someone else is choosing power. Either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. Benjamin Franklin. Most men will live and die unknown, leaving nothing but graves and forgotten names. Will you? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.